take things in or outside from a private domain to a public domain and the opposite, as well as you're not allowed to carry 4 amot, about 2 meters, inside the public domain, meaning outside, in a public domain. We spoke about the status of big cities nowadays, whether they are considered to be a biblical public domain or just a Carmelite, which is the rabbinically considered a prohibited space. And the custom is to rely on this matter that perhaps our cities don't fit in the categories of the biblical Reshut HaRabim, and therefore we can make them permitted by using a makeshift wall, a form of a door, after connected to another form of a door, So finally, it's called Tzurat HaPetach, it's called, and that's how we can carry, as if the whole neighborhood or the whole city even is considered to be a private domain. But when you don't have such an eruv, or if you don't want to rely on the eruv, if you want to be very careful, very strict with yourself about the potential problems, so then you can't carry things in your pockets and you can't carry things in your hands. But what can you do? We started talking about, you can wear clothes. You can wear. Wearing is not considered carrying. So that's what we're going to look at a little bit. There is, at the bottom page 129, a little bit of the caveat here. The sages ordained that one should not enter Reshut HaRabim wearing an item of clothing is likely to fall off. I'm concerned that he will end up carrying it. You'll pick it up and carry it. For Reshut HaRabim. Okay, so there's questions. For example, on the next page, you see on page 122, some maintain one should not wear gloves. Because you're always, taking them off if it's warm and putting them in your pocket, and then you'll be carrying. And other such things are curious. Sometimes you have an extra button. Do you have that on the bottom of your shirt? Sometimes they tie on an extra button. There you go. There you go. See that? That's not in use. That's just there in reserve. In case one of the buttons fall off, you'll have one of the same type. It's not, it could be problematic. Many times the suit has, look, I have 2 buttons here on my shirt. One I use, and the other one, sort of, I can make it smaller or bigger. Sometimes there's 2 buttons. Is that allowed? Yeah, you're carrying it for no reason. So here he says, if you look on page 123, according to most poskim, one may go out with them. It's standard for these buttons to be attached. They're considered part of the garment and secondary to it. So yeah, anything that's a normal part of the clothing, that's not just added on. Also, turn to the next page, 124. Items that serve the body. Can I go outside wearing my glasses? Well, sometimes I take my glasses off, as you can see, to read sometimes, or to clean them. So if you normally don't take them off, someone who's nearsighted, the glasses, it's just like, it's almost part of your body. It's secondary to the body. Sunglasses, however, is different. It depends if it's sunny or if it's cloudy. So there's many times you take them off, you put them in your pocket. So people say it's a problem. Clip-ons, or I have magnetic. If you normally take them off and put them on, you can't carry them. You can't even wear them because we're afraid you might take them off when it gets cloudy or something like that. It becomes particularly difficult to handle yourself in a city without an eruv when you have special needs. Take a look at page 125. If you need a cane to walk, Baruch Hashem, we have here an elderly gentleman who is very independent and strong. He could be running in the army, keeping up with all the youngsters in a second. But not everybody is so lucky to have his mobility, and sometimes you need a cane. Well, If the cane is indispensable, so then you're never gonna walk without it. It's considered to be part of, like your shoes. But in many cases, you can walk without it, and so you can't really use a cane. A blind person, we said, for example, somebody with a disability. It depends. If he can't manage without it, so it's essentially an extension of his shoes. It's part of his normal way of going out, then it's okay. But otherwise, it's a problem. Wheelchairs, let's assume it's manual, right? It's not electric, or you have some solution for electricity. But there's no eruv. Well, if he can propel himself, it's like his shoes. It's like that's the way he walks. So that's no problem. But if he can't propel himself, he has to be pushed. So then it's like pushing a baby carriage, and you can't push someone in a handicapped person in a wheelchair. What you have to do is find the solution of find a non-Jew to push the wheelchair. In that case, it becomes a shvut to shvut, which is permissible for great need and for the sake of the mitzvah to allow the handicapped person to get around, to go to shul, to go to meals, and so forth. So the principle is clear that if it's something that's indispensable, it's part of your walking, it's part of the way you must, it's a paraphernalia which you must use, so then it's allowed. But if it's something that's only sometimes used, it's an aid, then it's problematic. You're carrying it around half the time, and you can't do that without an eruv. I mentioned the other day that my grandmother had a brooch made with her house key, so she could carry around the key. It was part of the brooch, and brooch is allowed. So that shows us not only clothing are allowed, but also jewelry. Jewelry is allowed, and however, there's a problem with the jewelry thing, and that is, if you look on page 126 now, the sages in the second paragraph. One second, I'll just finish. The sages were concerned that a woman might want to show her friend her jewelry and remove it, and forget and violate the Torah law. So we have a distinction between two types of jewelry which are commonly taken off, and jewelry which are, you never really take them off. You look on page 127, he says, some people explain that jewelry is more common now. We do not need to worry that a woman will remove her jewelry in the street to show her friends. And that's why there is room to be lenient, that somehow we're not really so careful about wearing jewelry, and we're not this original fear that somebody would take it off. Maybe still today you can distinguish between two different types of jewelry which is normally taken off to be shown or not. Yes, Benjamin, you wanted to ask a question about something.
What is seeing eye dogs?
A seeing eye dog is somebody who's blind has a dog that guides them. Nowadays we call it a guide dog. There, I think in the old-fashioned terminology, it was called a seeing eye dog.
Okay.
But it's that if somebody needs it, he can't get around without it. So then it's okay. Actually, the truth is the dog is carrying himself. It's the only problem is the harness, and the harness is always attached to the dog. So you're not really carrying the harness. The dog is, you're holding on to it for him to lead you, and it's a wonderful thing. There's a whole other discussion about whether or not you can bring a guide dog into shul. Generally, we don't bring dogs into shul. It's not respectful. But there is room to be lenient for somebody. That's the way they get around. But it's a little more complicated. Last thing to talk about is other things that you must carry sometimes. See, here I am, spending it's now been a week and a day or 2 days since I have my new friend that I carry around, and concealed carry, as it's called. So I carry it even on Shabbat. Well, wherever I live, I have an eruv, so that's not really an issue, of course. Carrying it for protection. But without an Eruv, maybe it's a biblical prohibition. So we said, obviously, life and death. Hopefully we got that clear in the previous few classes, that if there's a security concern, you can even violate the biblical prohibition. And he says, he puts together with a gun on the bottom, page 129. He says, gun and a cell phone. Sometimes a cell phone's important. You could call an ambulance. You can call the police if you're in a dangerous area. So obviously when you have a danger to life, you can carry what you need. But let's say when you have something in between, like in some places you have to carry an identity card or a passport, or the police could pick you up or send you to jail or something. And so that's the great need. That would ruin your Shabbos, to be sent to jail because you don't have an identity card. But how can you carry it if there's no Eruv? So here we utilize usually a shinui. I remember when I was in the army, in a specific place, didn't have an Eruv. And we had to go out to guard duty, and every soldier has to carry his identity card. And there's also a first aid bandage you always have to put in it's called pakal kisim, you always have to have in your pockets. So I took it out of my pocket, I put it in my hat when I was going out to do shmirah. So you find a way to do it b'shinui. And for the sake of a mitzvah, you're allowed to do that. What else? Medication. Right? Some people, for example, have an allergy. That if they're going to be bitten by a bee, they could die. So what do they do? What do they have? EpiPen. They have a certain special needle with the anti-inflammatory medicine, and if they give it to themselves right away, they could save their life. So they carry it around their whole lives. People with such an allergy. What about Shabbat? There's no Eruv. How can you carry it along? So he says here too, we utilize a shinui. It's not always danger to life, but there's potential. And any doubtful danger to life overrides the Shabbat. But obviously, we try to minimize the violation by carrying it not in the normal way. So if normally you put it in your pocket or you put it in your purse, this time you would carry it. He suggests also putting it in your shirt or something, and it's just hanging there in between your shirt and your belt or something like that. Or carrying it, like I said, in your hat if you have a hat or something. Find some other solution. And people do get creative if they know that they have to carry outside of the Eruv and they have some needs. So like I said, like my grandmother had it made specially by some kind of smith, I don't know, who forged her house key into the piece of jewelry. So that is a solution that, as I said, usually we try to get a situation where you have an Eruv and you don't spend Shabbat outside the Eruv. But every once in a while, even if you do your best, a storm comes, knocks down the wires, you're without an Eruv. You got to know how to handle yourself. And so that's why we learned the basic laws of Hotza'ah. Questions? Comments? Okay, we managed to finish it. We didn't finish yesterday because Yehuda Cohen came, but today we finished up chapter 21. We're up to chapter 22. So harder to define the laws of the spirit of Shabbat. There are some laws which have a precedent, specifically in the Talmud. They speak about this idea. It's not don't think it's the new rabbis, they're just trying to protect against the secularism. No. This was a concern all the way back to biblical times, is that there's the 39 category of his work, but then there's also sort of another category, which is a rabbinic category, called Uvdin Dechol. We saw it a few times already, weekday activities. And that's because the rabbis felt that they must preserve the character of the day. And so there's a lot of modern questions which come up for all sorts of things we do to entertain ourselves, whether it's playing games or reading novels or reading the newspapers on Shabbat. Can you do that? Other things we mentioned in passing, that music. We know you're not allowed to play instruments on Shabbat. This is something that the rabbis are trying to ensure that the character of the day remains. So chapter 22 talks about this. And here we have to be very careful because, with all due respect to the laws that we've been saying up till now about the melachot and the precise definitions of the way, the purpose it was done for in the Mishkan, and it's got to be only biblical if it's permanent results and if it's done in the normal way, etc. It's very technical and legal. Of course, we're not going to do anything which is like squeezing, which is similar to laundering, and we follow those categories. But the big picture is sometimes even more important, and it's the little things which may even be a custom or may not even be prohibited biblically, but changes the entire character of the day. When we were talking about electronics and phones, we said, based on the 39 categories of work, it's very hard to really reach anything close to a biblical prohibition. There's no fire. The circuit's already completed in many cases, and maybe it's just the problem of chapter 22, that it's against the spirit of the Shabbat. And for many people, that's the most important part of creating a Shabbat, different atmosphere in Shabbat, is not to use your phones. So even though, according to the 39 categories, it's really not such a big deal, according to this issue, this is very central. And so I'm glad that Rabbi Menachem has an entire chapter about these types of activities which are forbidden, even though they don't fit neatly into any biblical violation, but they're very important for keeping the Shabbat. That's the spirit of Shabbat, chapter 22. Okay? And there's one particular example which gets its own chapter. And the truth is, in the Shulchan Aruch, it's many, many chapters. The laws of Muktzeh, that's chapter 23. We'll see afterwards. Muktzeh, we already mentioned it a few times, is that this pen is used for writing. So on Shabbat, I'm not allowed to handle it. Even though I'm not going to write, I'm going to keep the cap closed. I cannot do this on Shabbat. I cannot handle it, move it around. That's called Muktzeh. Muktzeh. Some people would pronounce it Muktzeh. Moving items, which we'll see, there's different types of Muktzeh. The rabbis declared that you're not allowed to handle many things. It's sort of like a subset of this general concern of the spirit of Shabbat, but it's also a rabbinic prohibition, according to most poskim, and we'll talk about that afterwards. So first, spirit of the Shabbat, and then the laws of Muktzeh, and pretty much we'll be done, and we'll be ready to celebrate, to get ready for the celebration of Chanukah, coming soon. Today is Rosh Chodesh Kislev, Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov Yisrael. L'chaim l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Amen. Let's sing our song. Can you get everybody to Siddur? Yes. Yes, Stephen, how are you?
Yes, Rabbi, I heard this, okay, let's say on Shabbat, the weather is very hot.
Yeah.
And there's a minyan wanted to pray, and the aircon is not on. So the person can on the aircon, or I heard they say they can on the aircon. Is it I don't know this.
Turning on the air conditioning on Shabbat, in many cases, in the hot climates, is not considered so much a luxury as a necessity. And that means that you might be able to be lenient for the sake of a mitzvah, right? You want to be davening on Shabbat, or you want to be enjoying with your family the meals on Shabbat. So if it's for the sake of a mitzvah, and it's not just a luxury, it's actually a necessity for the sake of a mitzvah, we learned that in some circumstances we can violate a rabbinic prohibition, especially if it's a doubly rabbinic prohibition. So it's doubly removed from the biblical prohibition. As for example, air conditioning. Well, let's say there's no filament, which is like fire in there. And so it's electricity. So electricity, we said, according to most poskim, is only rabbinically prohibited. And then what if you ask a non-Jew? That's a rabbinic prohibition. But it's a doubly rabbinic prohibition. And then if the non-Jew does it in not the normal fashion, he uses his knuckle to turn on the remote. And then what if he does it without you actually asking him to do it? It's prohibited to ask the non-Jew, but if you just hint to him that, it's really hot in here, maybe you could help us out, he'll get the idea that, how can I help them? Well, I could turn on, there's an air conditioner, I could turn it on for them. So he does it on his own. So that if you decide that it's a significant need for the sake of a mitzvah, as long as you have a shvut to shvut, you're doubly removed from the biblical prohibition, there's room to be lenient. And so yes, sometimes you will find this idea of the Shabbos goy. Somebody has, but for a Jew to turn on the air conditioning, that might be, if he does it in the abnormal way, that's rabbinic. And if you say that the electricity itself is rabbinic, generally we try to be machmir, because there's a debate about whether electricity is rabbinic or biblically prohibited. So I'd say you'd be, maybe only in very extreme circumstances would a rabbi allow you to for a Jew himself to turn on the air conditioning in the abnormal way. Usually we try to find a non-Jew to do it, and for the sake of a mitzvah, we can or at least hint to the non-Jew, and even actually ask him to, because it's shvut to shvut. It's so far removed from the biblical prohibition. But so putting on the air conditioning or turning off the air conditioning if it's too cold, or turning on the heater. The heater might be a little more problematic because something's heating up. It could be a fire. It could actually be fire, not just electricity. It could actually be. It depends. There's different types of different types of ways to heat the air. So you have to know a little bit more. But in general, we don't have Jews doing it themselves. Usually, we should try to arrange for a non-Jew if necessary, for the sake of a mitzvah. Make sure that you stay away from the biblical prohibitions for the Jew. And but using a non-Jew for, if someone's sick or someone's elderly or someone is really suffering because of the heat or the cold, that's exactly the use of the Shabbos goy that we talked about before. Okay? The Seder. And I, just yesterday someone was talking to me about how difficult it is as someone who's converting, who's trying very much to keep all the laws in training for the day that he goes to the mikvah. And then somebody says, "Whoa, well, you're not Jewish yet, so maybe you'll flick the switch for us on Shabbat. Maybe you'll be the Shabbos goy." It's me, a Shabbos goy? I already identify as a Jew, even though I know I'm not halachically yet. Finished the process. So it can be really hurtful to ask such a person. Some people take it like, fine, I'm not a Jew yet. I'm happy to help. But everybody, I think it's legitimate. The opposite reactions, that you feel offended or that it's inappropriate. And you don't want to. You make tremendous efforts to get used to keeping the Shabbat. And now this guy's going to come and force me to, or, nobody can force you. But it's a conflict. You want to be nice, at the same time you don't really want to break the Shabbat. But on the other hand, he's the one's obligated Shabbat, and you're not obligated, so it's not considered breaking for you. It is, if he were to turn on, it would be for him. So it's a complicated situation. You feel bad if you don't do it, right? Because I can help out a guy. Why shouldn't I help him out? But your feelings are legitimate too. And if you could say, I think many times, then people may not even be aware that it's difficult for someone who's converting, in the process of conversion, to behave in such a fashion. They may not be aware of how much you've trained yourself already, that anything that's a violation of Shabbat, you're going to run in the other direction. People don't know that. And so they may be insensitive. But sometimes you could say, listen, I don't want to do it, but let me help you find a different non-Jew who's not converting somebody. It's just a foreign worker or something like that, and they'll help you out. Or somebody who doesn't feel like you, so maybe somebody who doesn't have the same associations, or he doesn't. But it's a legitimate. You don't have to. You don't have to do something you don't want to. Nobody can force you, and if it doesn't bother you, then it could be a nice deed to help somebody out. But if it bothers you, then it may be not worth the cost. And you can ask somebody else. I think there's only once that I actually asked a student of mine who was converting to be the Shabbos Goy. And it was really, seriously, it was literally an old lady on a cold day, and the electricity went out, and she was sitting in the dark, in the cold, and there was no other foreign worker that we could find. And so I asked this person who actually, had no Jewish blood, and, he clearly was not Jewish yet. So he did that for them. But I try to avoid it. And I actually wrote an entire article about this issue and how it's not advisable to ask convert candidates to be the Shabbos Goy. So it depends on the circumstance. Every circumstance is different. Yeah.
In my wife yeshiva, they Shabbat they went to somewhere else, and there's someone from the synagogue came and asked them to do something. And the rabbi said, "Is it a matter of life and death? If not, then no, it cannot."
If it's a matter of life and death, a Jew could do it. But he didn't want them to be used as Shabbos Goy. Very nice. So it's a good intuition, especially if you're teaching. I think people who teach converts, they appreciate a little more what they go through and what the feelings are underneath. Sure, on the outside it looks like it's a plus. It's a 1 or a 0. You're either Jewish or you're not Jewish. You're not Jewish. The truth is also, one of the things I wrote in the article is that many non-Jews who are converting, any conversion candidates, actually might even be Jewish. Especially those coming from the former Soviet Union. They just don't have the papers to prove it, or who knows what. And then some of them actually already went in front of a Beit Din and they said that they want to be Jewish. There's some status to that as well. So there are stages in the conversion process which are significant halachically. So it might be problematic, actually. And of course, they may actually really be Jews. So many people convert who are already Jewish, but they just can't prove it. And so you're getting yourself in trouble when you try to, ask a conversion candidate to be your goy, your Shabbos goy. Yeah, so B'ezrat Hashem, soon you'll be Jewish, and then you can say to them, "I'm just the same as you, just the same, only in Pikuach Nefesh." And then you shouldn't even be asking me. Tell them what your rabbi said. If there's Pikuach Nefesh, you go do it as soon as possible, and you get the rabbi to do it. Right? All right. Page 233. Let's do the song that I taught you last time. And we said it this morning. Se'u Sharim Rashechem. We're returning the Sefer Torah back to the Ark after reading from the Torah for Rosh Chodesh. Got it? Page 233. In the second paragraph, about 4 lines from the end. Se'u she'arim rashechem vehinas'u pitchei olam. Do you have the place? It's in the paragraph Tilim Kaf Dalid. After the 2 dots, about 4 lines from the end of the paragraph. Se'u. Got it? Yeah? Everybody got it? Stephen, let me show you where it is. Put your finger there for him. Se'u. Okay? And you got it, Israel? Se'u. She'arim rashechem vehinas'u pitchei olam talalai lai lai ve'yavo melech hakavod הכבוד סלע, שאו שערים ראשיכם, והינשאו פתחי עולם, תלילי ויבוא מלך הכבוד, הכבוד סלע. מי זה מלך הכבוד? Let me skip to the last line. השם צבאות הוא מלך, השם צבאות הוא מלך, הכבוד סלע. Again, last line. מי זה מלך הכבוד? השם צבאות הוא מלך, השם צבאות הוא מלך, הכבוד סלע. You see, we take the word sela from the end, we tack it onto the end of the first line too, right? The first line of the song. We sort of take the first and the fourth line of this little poem. There's two times that we say Se'u she'arim rashechem, right? That the gates should lift up their heads. What's the head of a gate? I don't know. But it means open up. I think it means that the gates should open up, and so that the King of Glory may enter. We're welcoming in with the march, the King of Glory. The King of Glory, Selah. Selah is either musical notation or it's forever, eternal. Different meanings of Selah. Okay, so this is a nice little march, and we sing it at weddings. And there's even a dance. We spoke about it yesterday, that there's a unique dance many times associated with this. It's because the gates seem to be inviting in the King of Glory from maybe sort of dancing towards each other is sort of like opening of the gates, and the gates that go closer together and come out from each other. Okay, so that's the new one we did for Rosh Chodesh, and we sang it on Sunday. We didn't get to sing it yesterday, but we did say it in the prayers. And now, once we have our Sidurim open, we'll turn one page back to 231, and we'll pray for our hostages and for our soldiers and for everybody in the Jewish people who is in a time of trouble. You missed the class on Sunday. It's a beautiful class. We have the pages if you're interested. We went through some sources here. It's all in English. But we're going to pray now in solidarity with our all of the Jewish people. Okay, bottom page 231. You got it? Acheinu kol bet Yisrael, Acheinu kol bet Yisrael, hanetunim b'tzara, b'tzara ub'shivya, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. Again. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה, בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים בין ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה ויפנה לאורה, ומי שימון לגאולה השתם בגלה ובזמן קרב. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה ומיפלה לאורה ומשעבוד לגאולה השתת בעגלה ובזמן כברי. Okay. 2 more soldiers were killed yesterday, and but we also are having lots of success and moving ahead, cleaning out Gaza. We're closer and closer. Yesterday we decided it's a big, risky move on behalf of from the army. There's a few hospitals in Gaza. It's all surprising how many hospitals there are for such a small group of people. But anyways, there's a hospital there, and they finally managed to evacuate all the patients. And then, instead of having the Air Force just come and bomb and destroy the hospital, they decided to take the risk and to have a special unit of soldiers attack the building, taking the risk that they could have opposition and they could get injured themselves. But Baruch Hashem, nobody was injured. They went from room to room in the hospital. And why was this so important? Because now we can show the world that here is the hospital, the systems that are supporting the hospital, the electricity, the heating, and the cooling, and all that. And it's the same system that's heating and cooling and providing electricity for what's underneath the hospital. And directly underneath the hospital, of course, is a bunker filled with ammunition and the guns and rifles and a whole headquarters of Hamas directly underneath the hospital. So it's very important for us to show the world that, if we were just to destroy it from the air, we wouldn't be able to show this. And of course, Hamas is claiming, it's just fake, but who are you going to believe? Those murderous terrorists? Or are you going to be the official spokesman of the IDF actually turns out he used to be, before he was a spokesman, he was a combat soldier in that unit, the special unit who they sent. So he went with his unit, his former unit, to conquer this hospital and the underground bunker around it, and he was able to show them firsthand. Listen, this is what we found. And they even found some baby bottles and some indications that maybe the hostages were taken there after the 7th of October. So we don't know for sure, but clearly the Hamas uses the hospitals as protection, the human shields for their murderous organization. Now, does that mean that we're going to, with all the rest of the hospitals, hopefully we won't risk our soldiers anymore, and just once we can get out all the patients, there are some patients being treated there, get them out of the harm's way, and then we'll be able to bomb them and the entire infrastructure of the army, which is built so cynically and cruelly directly underneath the hospitals. There's a big hospital called Shifa Hospital. It's just, everybody's been talking about it. They used to have, till a few days ago, they had like a couple of thousand patients there. Now we're down to a couple of hundred patients because Israel's been calling the hospital staff and the directors, tell them, leave, get out. We can't ensure your safety anymore because we know what's underneath. Apparently the biggest Hamas headquarters is underneath this big hospital. And as soon as those civilians are out of harm's way, we'll be able to continue the maneuver and conquer more of the Hamas terrorists. But it's a slow process. Hashem should give us the strength to complete it and rid the world of this scourge of barbarians. Yes?
The Swedes pay for the hospitals.
Of course.
And
Yes.
now they say they are destroying. Send I to the guy that called me to tell.
Yeah, of course we're destroying it. You should have been more careful what what you're using your money for. Using your money for ammunitions and not for hospitals.
Uh, the hospital was really, and these people Swedes that pay there, and
Sure,
say
they mean well.
they say no, no, you are destroying the people.
Okay, so show them the pictures. Show them the pictures. Show them the. Unfortunately, this is the reality we have to face, and people are complaining. For some reason, they don't want to see. They don't want to see the truth, and it's really shocking. But I think it's just part of the anti-Semitism. Somehow, the Jew is always going to be at fault, to blame. But we have to be strong to know what the truth is, and we have to protect ourselves. Can no longer have them sitting on our doorstep, coming in to try to murder our children, and murdering, not just trying, taking hostages. Okay, Bezat Hashem, we'll see better times.
So after the war, does it mean that the Jewish people can settle in that place, or?
I think that would be wonderful, but I doubt it's practical.
But it's the fulfillment of the prophecy.
Yeah, we try, but just because it says it in the prophecy doesn't mean we can do it tomorrow. It also says the prophecy will have a third Beit HaMikdash, but we haven't managed to get to that yet. We're trying, but realistically speaking, I doubt it. But what do I know? Maybe I don't know the future. Maybe I think Zot Hashem, maybe we'll learn that just as the movement that we made to take down the settlements and just give them the territory and say, oh, we'll put them behind the fence and everything will be great. Clearly, that move was a big failure. But that's already politics. That's already hard to know what's going to happen.
I call them the guy that called me. You are naive.
Yes, for sure.
You are naive. No, we are humanist. We're safe.
Right. Yeah. They're so humanistic, so let them get out our hostages. That's where their money should be going. To get our hostages out, not to protect the terrorists. Anyways, chapter 22. Let's see inside. We'll go back to the laws of Shabbat. The mitzvah to preserve Shabbat as a day of rest. Okay? Page 131. Stephen, why don't you read for us?
The mitzvah to preserve Shabbat as a day of rest. The Torah commands us to refrain from malakah on Shabbat. But the 7th day is Shabbat of the Lord your God. You shall not do any malakah. Shemot 29. This is any of the 39 type of malakah done while erecting the Mishkan, as explained to Moshe at Sinai. See above 9 verse 1 to 2. The sages added safeguard fences so that no one will do anything that might lead to the violation of the Torah prohibition. There is an additional commandment in the Torah to rest on the Shabbat. 6th day you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall cease. Shemot 23, verse 12. The point here is that in addition to avoiding malakah on Shabbat, we also meant to cease and rest from toil and trouble. Thus, one should not open his door or move heavy object in preparation for the work week, even though these are not included in the 39 prohibited category for malakah. Nevertheless, acting in this way negates the mitzvah of resting on Shabbat. Rambam, Vayikra 23, verse 24. Continuing this line of thought, we find the Prophet enjoining us to preserve the holy and sanctified atmosphere of Shabbat, a day of which one must avoid mundane activity. One who is careful to follow this merit, great reward, as Yeshayahu declared. If you refrain from trampling the Shabbat, from pursuing your affair On my holiday, if you call Shabbat delight, the Lord's holiday honor. If you honor it and not go in your own way, no look to your affair, no speak of them, then you will see the Lord delight. I will set you astride the height of the earth, and let you enjoy the heritage of your fathers Jacob. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Yeshayahu 58:13 to 14. The census rewrite many guidelines about Shabbat from this verse, and the common denominator is that one should not behave on Shabbat as one does during the week. The Gemara elaborates, only your Shabbat clothes shall not be like your weekday clothes, not go in your own way. The way you walk on Shabbat should not be like the way you walk on weekdays. Not look to your affair. It is forbidden to look after your own affair on Shabbat, but one may look after the affair of heaven, that is, religious matters. No speak of them. Your speech on Shabbat should not be like your speech on weekday. Speaking about mundane things is forbidden, but thinking about them is permitted. Shabbat 113a. This directive had a higher status than general rabbinic enactment, since they are rooted in the Torah commandment to rest and are elaborated upon by the prophets. We have already explained the principle connected to honoring and delighting in Shabbat.
Chapters 2, 4, 5, and 7. As in the first volume, we talked about it. Who can give me an example? Who remembers what is a directive that stems from honoring the Shabbat? No. Kavod. Here, the psukim from Yeshayahu. These are rabbinic obligations. He says it here. He says, honor is expressed by wearing Shabbat clothes, showering, cleaning the house. We said it seems to be focused on preparing for the Shabbat properly, right? And then oneg, the other rabbinic category, it's not only rabbinic. What he's saying here is that it's rabbinic, but it's based on the pasuk in Yeshayahu, and the pasuk in Yeshayahu is an elaboration on the mitzvah to rest. What the Ramban says is all sorts of activities which are going to disturb your rest, your restful attitude towards the Shabbat. And so, kavod and oneg we said is making the Shabbat enjoyable, having good food, right? So we learned some of these categories of how we honor and delight in the Shabbat, but now we have to read additional laws, which not are necessarily only connected to lighting the candles and having the good food. We said that you have to have good food and Torah study on Shabbat and sleep. But beyond that, there's more. There's more things like the psukim that we read above in Yeshayahu. They don't only say honor and delight in the Shabbat. It goes on to it speaks about how you speak, how you walk, right? How you conduct yourselves in general. And so we have additional laws which, although they're not violating any of the 39 categories of work, they are something that you have to be aware of. Who can give me an example? So, a way of speech that you're not supposed to speak on Shabbat.
Politics.
Talking about money, yeah, politics, okay. It depends. If it's holy politics, then maybe business though, yeah. Cursing. Gossip, that's prohibited the entire week. Not only on Shabbat. But you're right, sometimes on Shabbat we have more of an opportunity. We have to be careful. Okay, what about walking? Do you have to walk differently on Shabbat? What does that mean?
Maybe no rushing.
Yeah, no running. Not allowed to run. Except if you're running to shul. That's allowed. To go to a mitzvah, you're allowed. We're going to see these details about that. But business is really hard sometimes. You know what they say. That the Jews many times have a hard time with this issue of not talking about business. Because, it is a day of gathering where the community gets together. Usually everybody's in their own business and then everybody gathers together. Sometimes you need to talk with your friends, and what's in your head is business. You're going to talk about business. It's a really hard one to refrain from talking about anything mundane. I'll tell you a joke about that later. Yeah.
Taking grass. normally people go to the park, sit in the grass.
Right, so that's actually part of the 39 categories of work
Yes,
that you're not
yes.
allowed to cut down. Here we have it already on the front page. In the um, where's the harvesting? Here, the harvesting. You're not allowed to cut down wheat, but you're also not to cut down the grass. You're not allowed to cut the grass or to cut down branches, disconnecting a fruit from the tree. All these are prohibited on Shabbat. And we have to be careful. When you go to the park, you don't pick up the leaves, you don't play with the grass. You're allowed to sit down and you're allowed to walk on most types of grass, since not necessarily, it's not inevitable. Remember our discussion about consequences, secondary consequences of your actions? Who remembers what that was called? So if it's inevitable, then it's sikresha. The starting point is that it's not intended. Tavar she'eino mitkaven. So walking on the grass, you just want to walk. You're not intending to rip up some leaves, some blades of grass. And so that's fine as long as the grass is low. And so normal walking on the grass doesn't inevitably tear off blades of grass. Sometimes it just tamps down the grass, and that's fine. You're not detaching it. But if you have tall grass, you imagine the jungle, right? And you're walking through the jungle, you've got to cut your way through. Each step you take is tearing off some parts of that grass. So that's inevitable. So then it's psikresha. And that's prohibited. So, is it raining? Just dark. In any case, so yeah, if you're careful and the grass is not high grass, you can walk on grass. You can sit down on grass, just not high grass. So, okay, let's go back. That was a little bit back to the issues of malacha. But here, let's say there's no malacha prohibited. There's still rules regarding how to make Shabbat a special day, a day of rest, and even though really these are not, each specific action is not defined as a biblical prohibition, it can become biblical because it's based on these ideas of the prophets and the rabbinic enactments on to distance you from anything that is a malacha, and this general, all overarching principle that we're supposed to rest, that the Ramban said, we saw at the beginning. And let's see some of the examples in this paragraph. We stopped at the beginning of the last paragraph, page 132. Okay, so start again from the last paragraph.
They have already explained the mitzvot connected to honoring and delighting in Shabbat. Honor, kavod, is expressed by wearing special Shabbat clothes, showering, cleaning the house, and lighting candles. Delight or neck is expressed by making Shabbat enjoyable through meal, sleep, and Torah study. In this chapter, we will explain the mitzvot and the rabbinic safeguard meant to protect Shabbat atmosphere as a holy day of rest. These mitzvot are the root of everything that the sages through the ages forbade as a weekday activity. Any activity that is unquestionably mundane is prohibited on Shabbat. This includes ball playing or not, swimming, working out, and bike riding. To protect the spirit of Shabbat, the sages also introduced the prohibition of muzeh, as explained in the next chapter, and then that one may not play musical instrument, even though the mitzvah to preserve Shabbat spirit and avoid weekday activity within they hold are of highest status than the safeguard of the sages. Nevertheless, the halakha is stricter in demanding adherence to the safeguard, such as the prohibition to do malakah with a sinui, or ask the non-Jews to do a malakah, which are forbidden even for the sake of a mitzvah, as explained above. Whereas the prohibition connected to preserving the spirit of Shabbat may be disregarded in the service of a mitzvah. There are some prohibitions that are comprised of both of these elements. if prohibited solely to preserve the spirit of Shabbat, it might have been prohibited for the sake of the mitzvah. But since the sages decree that it is prohibited, it remains prohibited even for the sake of mitzvah.
Okay, so we got here a multi-layered defense system. It's like the missiles attacking Israel, right? So we have Iron Dome. We have, before we have Iron Dome, we have sometimes the tanks and the armored personnel carriers, they have something called a raincoat. You know what that is? It's not a raincoat, that's a code word for a system which ensures that if an RPG or an anti-tank missile or something is shot at the vehicle, it'll explode not inside the vehicle but outside of it before it actually reaches, sort of like a raincoat. It keeps the rain on the outside before it gets in, and this is being used all over the world now. Very low tech, even very low tech. There's low tech and there's high. There's different elements to it, but that's one layer of protection. Then we have, Iron Dome, which shoots down rockets and mortars, and then we have for longer range missiles, which may even be guided. There's the Arrow Chetz system, devised by Israelis and together with the Americans developed. And then we have Chetz number 1, generation number 2, and generation number 3. This is an anti-ballistic missile system, and it was just used 3 days ago for the first time. The Chetz number 3 was just used, and what's special about that is that it can intercept missiles outside the atmosphere that are shot through space. So for the first time, just a few days ago, this is a new technology, never before, a rocket was shot down in outer space. So you've heard about Star Wars and fighting in space. It just happened. It just happened for the first time, Israel, and this is a revolutionary system. Apparently from Yemen, they shot a missile at us from thousands of kilometers away through space. Yeah. Through space, and we managed to intercept it in space, outside the atmosphere.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing. So, Star Wars, definitely. In any case, so that's another layer of protection. Then there's, of course, the new layer which is being developed. Apparently, it's also working. This is the laser. The laser that's shooting down missiles. Yeah, amazing. So there's a lot of layers of protection. Same thing with Shabbat. Shabbat, we have the core, which is the mitzvot of the Torah, the biblical mitzvah of the Torah that we have to preserve, both the negative commandments that we're not allowed to do, the Zachor, right? That don't violate any of the prohibited activities, and also the positive commandments. We're supposed to remember the Shabbat. Sorry, Shamor is the negative and Zachor is the positive. But then we have another layer of protection, and that's the rabbinic layer, who say, well, we don't want you to even get close to any of those prohibited activities. But now what we're adding on is that there's another layer of protection, that the rabbis padded the Shabbat, not only to prevent prohibited malachot, but also to induce the atmosphere which will enable you to fulfill the positive commandments of Shabbat, for example, to rest. And it should be a day of inspiration and holiness. And so we have additional mitzvot, some clearly defined as a rabbinic positive commandment, kavod and oneg, that we have to honor the Shabbat and we have to delight in the Shabbat. We learn those laws in the first volume. But also this volume, now this chapter is primarily going to be talking about activities which are not specifically defined, but they fit into the category, the sages decided that they fit into the category of mundane activities, activities which are normally performed on a weekday, and so we want to make Shabbat different. So we make, for example, running. You can go for a run on a weekday, but on Shabbat we don't, because that's a different type of activity. That's a weekday type of activity. To protect the spirit of Shabbat, there's a few more. That's another layer of protection. It's like a raincoat, or I don't know the arrow missile. I don't know how to make it precisely equivalent. But the idea is that there are additional prohibitions which comprise protection on the Shabbat. Now here it's complicated. Sometimes you'll have an action which the sages say, don't do this on Shabbat. For example, riding a bicycle. So there may be in that prohibition elements protecting you from the biblical prohibition, because maybe the bike will break down and you'll fix it, and that might be a biblical prohibition. But it's also protecting you from the rabbinic level of preserving the atmosphere of Shabbat. If everybody's riding their bikes, it's transportation day, it's not the day of rest, being in your place. Maybe it's connected to the prohibition of hotza'ah, we said, that you're not allowed to carry things outside of in the public domain, etc. So we have some prohibitions of the sages which tick all the boxes. They protect us from the direct missiles, from the ballistic missiles, even from the missiles which come from outer space. And some of you may, in some of the examples we're going to see here, you may be scratching yourselves, why did the rabbis prohibit that? That's like from outer space. That doesn't seem so intuitive, but the rabbis, with their vision, realized that if we don't set up this protection system, Shabbat is going to suffer. Shabbat is such a central mitzvah, so we have multi-layer protection system for defense of the Shabbat. Yes?
For sure, you're not allowed to fix the bike on Shabbat, but I've seen many religious kids riding bikes, skates, whatever else on Shabbat on the roads around.
How old are they?
Kids. Kids.
Notice, you'll see much fewer religious kids after bar mitzvah and when they're adults. The truth is, in some communities, you won't even see little children riding bikes or even roller skates or the scooters of various kinds or even rollerblades. Some people, some families and some communities say that's all should be not used on Shabbat. But there are some communities where they're for kids, it's just a toy, it's not. But once they get older, it's pretty much universal that we don't use bicycles for adults.
Also they even made gear devices to ride around. Like for example, a chair on the skateboard on the huge piece of wood with lots and lots of wheels.
Kids will be kids, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. The general rule is, as we're going to learn here, these things are generally prohibited. But because, as we said, not all of these are clearly defined by halakha, the specific action being prohibited, so there'll be some flexibility between communities. Some rabbi in his community decided that for my community, it won't ruin the Shabbat atmosphere, this type of roller skates, for example. And so he said, okay, and it's little kids anyways, we'll let the kids play, and he's not strict about it. But in another community, they will be strict. So there is some variability in some of the laws we're going to learn in chapter 22. Whereas chapter 23, the laws of muktzeh are much more clearly defined. In halakha, there's this type of muktzah, that type of muktzah, these types of objects you can handle, these types you can't. There it's more clearly defined. This chapter, the spirit of Shabbat, is the most vague in terms of its precise definitions. But there are some, and Rabbi Menachem is going to teach us some of the specifics. And then there are some which are, dependent on the community. Okay, so let's get to it. What do you say? Okay. The biggest one here, it's very funny actually. What's the most important mitzvah? Let's say you want to keep Shabbat. Someone who's not been religious, he didn't grow up keeping Shabbat. What's the hardest thing to stop doing on Shabbat?
Smoking?
Smoking is a good one. Yeah, if you're addicted, that could be hard. Cell phone. A lot of people are addicted to their cell phone too. Cooking, yeah, okay, I hear that. But believe it or not, for most people, it's work. People have a store. Commerce, Saturday, Shabbat, many times it's the biggest day if you have a restaurant, right? But people work 7 days a week nowadays to make a livelihood, and to close the business, totally turn it off for an entire 25 hours. It's a big challenge, very difficult. And let's think about this. Well, if I have the electricity running from before Shabbat, people can put their credit card into the machine without me touching any buttons. I'm not carrying anything. I'm just sitting in the store. I'm not writing anything. Who said it's prohibited to work on Shabbat? The types of work are only these 39 categories. But when I do business, that's not necessarily prohibited. This is one of the we have many different, this gets canceled out very quickly by these protective elements. For example, business, usually you need to write down, either a bill of sale or IOU or something, or you want to order some more parts, so writing is biblical, prohibited. So the rabbi said there's a rabbinic prohibition against commerce because you might be led to doing a malacha. But beyond that, of course, it also is going to lead you to totally destroy the character of the day. If you're working on Shabbat, you're not having a Shabbat of rest and enjoyment and holiness. It's just the most mundane activity there is, to be handling money and so forth. Exactly, I saw what you were doing. It's a good example. Handling the money. That's going to be violating the spirit of the Shabbat. So we see that even though business itself might not be violating a biblical prohibition of malacha, the 39 categories, it's definitely prohibited because of this the spirit of Shabbat. Let's see, there's actually verses in the Torah. Here we are in Jerusalem. It's amazing. Jewish people haven't been living in, or haven't had a Jewish country. So many Jews haven't lived in Israel for thousands of years. But there was another time when the Jews were in exile and then they came back to Israel. When was this? Jews were in exile and then they're lucky. Thousands and thousands of Jews came back as a group. When was that?
Before the second temple?
At the beginning of the second temple. That's right. 70 years in exile, the Babylonian exile, and the Jewish people came back. And when they came back, they were rabbis who were their leaders. They were prophets too, but everybody that came back, did they wear a black hat? Did they have a gartel? Were they Shabbat observers? Well, some of them weren't. Some of them weren't. There were other problems. When they came back from the exile in Babylon for 70 years, 70 years is a long time. Right? We talk about the communist regime, 70 years of communism. It made people forget their Judaism and assimilate and intermarry, right? We have all sorts of stories. We know this is a modern history. Then it was no different. So when many of the Jews came back to Israel after the Babylonian exile, who did they come back with? One of the two major problems, which is discussed. This goes back to the biblical times, so we have biblical discussion. In the Tanakh, we have the discussion about how to keep Shabbat in the Second Temple time. Who was the leader? Or two leaders that we know of? Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah, the two buddies. So in the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, there's a discussion about how they were telling the people, you must keep Shabbat. They were also telling the people that they have to divorce their non-Jewish wives. The assimilation, this was a big issue back then too. Because you're so many years in the exile, you've got the non-Jewish, the assimilation into the non-Jewish peoples. In any case, Nehemiah, it's verses in the Tanakh itself speak about We have to be careful. We're coming back to the land of Israel. We have to keep halacha. We have to keep the Torah. We have to keep Shabbat. And what does he say to them? Don't plow? Don't write? Don't cook? What does he say to them primarily? He says to them, don't do business. Wait, business? That's not one of the 39 categories of work. As we said, clearly this is a primary activity which violates the Shabbat. Or at least some of these protective elements of the Shabbat. Or the positive commandments of Shabbat, to rest, and so on and so forth. Let's see it inside. Rabbi Menachem quotes it here in page 133, section 2, about prohibited activities that are against the spirit of Shabbat. Yosef, will you read for us?
Business. One may not engage in commerce on Shabbat. One who opens his store, buying and selling on Shabbat just as he does on weekdays, negates a Torah commandment. This prohibition applies even if he is careful to avoid transgressing any of the 39 melachot. The Torah commands that Shabbat be a Shabbaton, Shemot, a complete cessation. One who does business in his store is not resting on Vayikra, Rivta, and Nehemiah faced this problem when he arrived in Jerusalem and found that the people were holding market market day on Shabbat. He recounts tyrants, merchants, who lived there, brought fish and all sorts of wares and sold them on Shabbat to the Jedites in Jerusalem. I censured the nobles of Judah, saying to them, what evil thing is this that you are doing, profaning Shabbat day? This is just what your ancestor did, and for it Hashem brought all this misfortune on the city. And now you give cause for further wrath against Israel by profaning Shabbat. Nehemiah. As a result, the merchants began selling their goods outside the city walls on Shabbat. In response, Nehemiah ordered that the gates of the city be closed over Shabbat. Once or twice, the merchants and the vendors of all sorts of wares spent the night outside Jerusalem, but I warned them, saying, what do you mean by spending the night alongside the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands upon you. From then on, they did not come on Shabbat. The Torah prohibition on commerce applies to one who regularly does business on Shabbat. However, one who buys or sells on Shabbat occasionally transgress the words of the prophets. As Yeshayahu said, if you honor it and do not go in your way, nor look to your affairs, nor speak of them. And the sages explained this to mean that one should not deal in mundane matters on Shabbat. It should be noted that those verses do not record a prohibition or buying and selling for the sake of a mitzvah. Nevertheless, a safeguard, and the sages prohibited all business dealings, even service of a mitzvah, out of concern lest one write Rashi Tosafot, page Mishnah Berurah. The only exception to this prohibition is the mitzvah of settling the land of Israel, for which one may purchase land from a non-Jew on Shabbat. The non-Jew should write the contract and take the money on his own.
Okay, this is a famous law, a very Zionist law, that of course you're not allowed to do business on Shabbat, but if you need to do business to buy a house in the land of Israel, that's holy real estate. Holy real estate, you still can't violate the Shabbat. But you can be flexible with the rabbinic prohibition of having a non-Jew do the activities and writing on your behalf and signing the contract and things like that. So this is doesn't allow you to do a biblical prohibition, but a rabbinic prohibition is relaxed for the sake of Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of settling in the land of Israel. Yaakov, I see that you brought something with.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Great. You want to grab your vessel, your instrument, and we'll take the opportunity. Okay, sounds good. We actually, maybe I'll even teach you a new song. But we'll review. We have the books out. We're going to do some songs. The ones, it's always good to review and to actually learn it. Yes, sir.
For Shabbat, can I ask what time?
2:33. What?
For Shabbat.
What about Shabbat?
Can I ask you what time we will meet?
Can you arrange a meeting?
Yeah.
If it's not for business, then yes.
No, I want to see you money.
No. To see your money? No. No. It's not allowed. It's business. You're not allowed to do business on Shabbat, yeah?
There's opinion that if you're doing business on Shabbat, out of like exact need, like you don't have any choice, then you're supposed to give away all the money that you earn as a tzedakah.
That's a nice idea, but it still doesn't make it permitted. Yeah. So that's the joke I was going to tell you while Idan comes and you guys tune up. The joke is that the Jews always have trouble with this prohibition. Because they have business and they meet each other in the shul. They don't talk the rest of the week, but now they talk. And somehow the Jews couldn't control themselves. And so they say, sometimes there's a phrase, you might have heard this before. It's in Yiddish. It's nisht b'Shabbos geret. You're not supposed to talk about it on Shabbos. And so they'll ask, for example, here's the joke. Friday night, man sits down in shul, and he sees his friend, and he says to him, nisht b'Shabbos geret, without talking about it on Shabbos, I see that you have a car for sale. And the guy responds and he says, nisht b'Shabbos geret, we're not supposed to talk about it on Shabbos, but yeah, it's a really good deal. It's only, it's only 10,000 shekels.
You're not supposed to mention money.
I know. And so he sort of made his excuse by saying nisht b'Shabbos geret. And then they go home, they sleep over it. The next morning, they go to shul for shacharit. And he says, you know about that car, the year it is nisht b'Shabbos geret. We shouldn't talk about it. But, the price is a little bit expensive for that year and for that model. And the guy responds and he says, nisht b'Shabbos geret, I won't take a penny underneath 5,000 shekels. They go home, they have lunch. Here comes the punchline. They go back for mincha. And he sits next to him in mincha and he says, you know what, nisht b'Shabbos geret. We see, without talking about it on Shabbat, it seems to fit my needs. I'll give you 6 for it. And the other guy responds, nisht b'Shabbos geret, we shouldn't talk about it. Already sold. It's a horrible joke. It's a horrible thing where, of course, this is a violation of the Shabbat. You shouldn't be doing business, even though you make an excuse. You're all set? You're all good? So open up to page 233. 233 in the Siddur. Give these men a Siddur. I don't know if you're able to do both at the same time. So you'll play. Yeah, you'll just play. Okay. We'll do the singing. 233. Siyu she'arim rashechem. You got it. Okay. No. Let me show you. Starting over here. So, there you go. Okay, great. All right. You ready? Okay. Seu she'arim rashechem vehinas'u pidchei olam v'yom kavod hakavod Seu she'arim rashechem vehinas'u pidchei olam v'yom hakavod Mi ze melech hakavod Hashem tzevakot Hu Melech. Last line. Hashem Tzevakot Hu Melech. Hakavod Sehenah. Mizeh Melech Hakavod. Hashem Tzevakot Hu Melech. Hashem Tzevakot Hu Melech. Hakavod Sehenah. Now from the top, without words. Okay, without words, we'll just sing it. La 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 la. La 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 la. De la 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 la. Da la 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 la. Di da 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 da. Di da dum 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 da 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 da. Da da ya da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Faster. Da 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 da. Hey da 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 da. Da da la la la. Da 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 do do do. Beautiful! Wow, thank you. Amazing. Turn back. Page 231 now. And we'll do Achenu. We'll do Achenu. Give him the key. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay. Achenu, page 231. The last paragraph. Achenu. Achenu. Kol Beit Yisrael. Achenu. Kol Beit Yisrael. Hanetunim b'tzara. B'tzara u'b'shivya. Omdim ben bayam uven bayam Achenu kol Beit Yisrael. Achenu kol Beit Yisrael. Hanetunim b'tzara u'b'shivya. Omdim ben bayam uven bayam Hamakom Yerachem Yerachem Aleichem Yitzim Yitzam Le'avacha U'Yafayim B'Shiram Le'Geola Hashem Israel, you send it to us? Israel, you'll send it to the group? Beautiful. Okay, should we do one more? Because you guys, once you have the instruments out, let's do one more. I want to teach you. Everybody turn to page. This is a happy song, happy, hopeful song, full of promise. Page 119. 119, the last three lines. We're going to skip the middle line. We'll just only do the third last verse and the last verse. It's in a section called Yechavot, and it's Tehillim 98, 94. It goes like this. Ki lo yitosh Hashem, ki lo yitosh Hashem amo. Ki lo yitosh Hashem amo, v'nachalato lo ya'azov. Again. Ki lo yitosh Hashem, ki lo yitosh Hashem amo. Hashem will not forsake his people. Ki lo yitosh Hashem, v'nachalato lo ya'azov. Now we skip to the last line. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hamelech Ya'anenu b'yom koreinu. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hamelech Ya'anenu b'yom koreinu. That's it. It's simple. Two parts. Okay. Ki lo yitosh Hashem, ki lo yitosh Hashem amo. Ki lo yitosh Hashem amo, v'nachalato lo ya'azov. Again from the top. Ki lo yitosh Hashem, ki lo yitosh Hashem amo. Ki lo yitosh Hashem amo, v'nachalato lo ya'azov. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hamelech Ya'anenu b'yom koreinu. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hamelech Ya'anenu b'yom koreinu. Now just the tune. La 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 Got it. Very nice. Okay, it's hard on the spot. Take some practice. Okay. That's it. It's a fun one. It's a fun one. It's full of hope. Right? The English is, for the Lord will not abandon his people, nor will he forsake his heritage. And the last line is, Lord, save. Hashem Hoshia. May the King answer us on the day we call. Ready? One more time. We'll try that. Okay? Ki lo yitosh Hashem, ki lo yitosh Hashem amo. Ki lo yitosh Hashem amo, v'nachalato lo ya'azov. Ki lo yitosh Hashem, ki lo yitosh Hashem amo. Ki lo yitosh Hashem amo, v'nachalato lo ya'azov. Hashem Hoshia, Hamelech Ya'anenu. Hashem Hoshea, HaMelech Ya'anenu, HaMelech Ya'anenu, B'yom Koreinu. Hashem Hoshea, HaMelech Ya'anenu, Hashem Hoshea, HaMelech Ya'anenu, HaMelech Ya'anenu, B'yom Koreinu. Well done. Okay, we have a high class shir. Well done. Thank you very much. We'll stop here for today. Hashem will